Hello, my name is Dr. Paige Hu, and I'm a biology professor at San Diego Mesa College. In this tutorial, you will learn how to use Google Sheets to make a bar graph for categorical data. If you do not know how to access Google Sheets, you can go to the Welcome page of our data analysis website for more information. Once you have access to Google Sheets, you can then join us in this tutorial. Let's get started. So here we are looking at the Google Sheets application, and you can see that we have our categorical data that has been highlighted. This categorical data is specifically showing the maximum weight in kilograms for different African pangolin species. A pangolin is a solitary, scale-covered mammal that can roll into a tight ball when threatened. Pangolins are sadly the most trafficked mammal in the world, and their conservation status ranges from vulnerable to critically endangered, depending on the species. We encourage you to learn more about pangolins and participate in their conservation efforts. So let's look at how to make a chart. So we have our categorical data, which is data that is not numerical or in words. We have labeled this data appropriately here as African pangolin species. We then have our dependent variable, which is going to go on the y-axis, and this is the maximum weight of each species in kilograms. Notice for our numerical data, it's important to include your unit so we know what these numbers actually mean. Now we are ready to make a chart with our data. So we are going to highlight the data. You just drag across any important boxes. And you can insert a chart by either going to Insert, Chart, or once you have your data highlighted, by going along the toolbar till you find this Chart button. It actually looks like a bar graph, so that's helpful for us. If we click this button, we are going to get our chart editor. And look at that, Google has already decided to make us a bar graph. I'm just going to move this graph down slightly to make it easier for us to see our data and our chart. So all of the editing for this chart is going to happen in what is called the chart editor. The chart editor has two major tabs, the Setup tab and the Customize tab. You want to start with your Setup tab because that is where you choose your chart type. Now Google is relatively intuitive, so it was able to determine that categorical data was being used and that a bar graph, which Google calls a column chart, is appropriate for this data. If you ever wanted to change the chart type, you would then click this button and scroll down to pick things like pie charts, scatter plots, etc. But we are happy with this column chart, also as I mentioned called a bar graph. We can then go to the Customize tab to make this graph even better. If you use the Chart Style folder, you would be able to edit the background color and the color of the lines. In this case, they are white and gray, which is okay by me. I believe that's easy to read. Now, what about the axis titles and the chart title? I'm going to choose to delete the chart title. It is uncommon for us to have chart titles in scientific papers. Rather, we create figure legends. But if you need a title for your chart, then you can enter that title here. I recommend checking with your instructor what they prefer. Now let's go to the horizontal axis. We have it titled African Pangolin Species, which was pulled automatically from the data in our table. So this is a good title, right? We know what these values refer to, so I'm going to leave that alone. I could, however, edit the size if I wanted to make this more readable. Now, let's go to the vertical axis title. Once again, Google has chosen to autofill the title text using the name of that column, and we can see that we have the important information. We know what is being measured, in this case, the maximum weight of the species, and we have a unit, kilograms. Make sure that if you have numerical data, you always have a unit included. I can then edit the size of the font if I feel that this makes the chart clearer to read. Let's move on to look at the data itself. In this tab, you are able to change the color of your bars. Perhaps you prefer them to be purple. In this tab, you can also add data labels. The data labels are going to add numbers onto our chart that allow us to tell what the values actually are. So for example, S. gigantea has a maximum weight of 33 kilograms. You can adjust the position of those labels to be, for example, on the outside end or on the inside base, if you feel that that, again, makes the graph more clear for the reader. Now, we don't have a legend here because we aren't dealing with multiple treatments or multiple groups, so we can move on to the horizontal axis tab. The horizontal axis tab is going to help us actually edit these categories on the horizontal axis. So I could make the font size larger if I wanted to make it clearer to read. Maybe that's too large, right? So I could scale it back, try to make the size of the text about equal to the width of the column. I could also edit the vertical axis by going to the vertical axis tab. Here, once again, I can change that font size, perhaps make it clearer to read. And now since we're dealing with numerical data, you could edit the minimum and maximum values of the axis. So Google has auto-chosen to have the axis go by 10 from 0 to 40. But our maximum value is 33. So perhaps you'd like to zoom in a little bit more. You could choose, let's say, from 0 to 35. And now you see that we have scaled in a little bit more on this data so that we may be able to see some of the differences more clearly. When adjusting those values on the axis, you generally want to think about minimizing the amount of blank space and maximizing the amount of space that your data takes up. This allows the reader to see the data easily and more easily interpret your figure. So this is our completed graph then. Once again, there are some variables that we chose purely aesthetically, like including these data labels or the size of the text, but we see the key aspects of the graph being represented. We have an axis label for our horizontal axis and for our vertical axis. If we have numerical data, we have that data labeled in units, so we know what those numbers represent. We also see that we are using bar charts or bar graphs because that's most appropriate for our categorical data. And so it's very easy for us to determine what these variables are and what the values are. Now, when you're done with your graph and you're happy with your product, you may want to download it as an image to include in your homework or to print. You could do that using these 3 little buttons at the top, or 3 little dots. You click on that, you can see that there is an option to download. And you could download the image as a PNG image or as a PDF image. That would allow you to more easily print it or include it in your homework packet. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video on how to create a bar graph using Google Sheets. If you're looking to create a graph for numerical data, such as a scatter plot, please watch our other video on creating scatter plots in Google Sheets on our Graphing Fundamentals page. As always, we appreciate your time and hope you have an awesome day.